Hey everyone, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. Good to see you all again. Hope you're doing well out there. So, kind of diving into my batch recording of videos for the week, and I thought we would start with what I think is a very interesting question. So, I run a biweekly coaching group, which, by the way, the link will be down below if you're interested in it. And on the call this week, we had a really, I think, a very interesting question that wasn't really part of the curriculum of what I was teaching, but I think is a really important thing to address. And it's something that, depending on the kind of content you're looking at around psychedelics, you may not hear a lot about. And this is this question of when you're processing heavy emotions. Let's say you take some psychedelics and you're kind of having a heavy experience, right? There's a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, a lot of overwhelm. Is it possible that you are processing the collective consciousness, the collective challenges, fears, worries, griefs, suffering, sorrows of life on Earth as human beings, life on Earth beyond human beings, the weight of history, these kinds of broad transpersonal sufferings? And so I thought we'd talk about it a bit here, and I just kind of riff on the topic with you guys a bit and unpack it. So let's talk about it. Okay, so I do think that this question, this topic of transpersonal issues and transpersonal suffering, transpersonal pain, is a really important one to address when it comes to the conversation of psychedelics. I do think there's a bit of nuance to this answer, so I'm going to try to provide a little of that nuance here. But yeah, it's easy inside of like a psychedelic therapy context, if we're talking about healing and personal growth, personal transformation with psychedelics, to really focus down on the individual, to really focus on the content of our own experience, to really focus on all the maybe subtle, hidden traumas, issues, pains, instances of suffering, negative learnings, kind of emotional attachments, hangups, fears, anxieties that might be kind of, I don't want to say repressed, but maybe kind of suppressed a little bit in the body, in the consciousness, that tend to kind of come up, right? And so this is a lot of what we tend to think about and focus on when we're talking about healing in the context of psychedelics. But what about if you're feeling something really deep and really heavy and really sad, but it's not yours, right? Is that possible? I would say absolutely yes. That's definitely possible. And there is some conjecture around this. I think this is a valid topic to debate and challenge and question and think about. So I'm certainly open to being wrong about this, but from my own experience and based on what I've seen and based on what I see working with clients on the regular here, it's absolutely possible that some of what we feel, some of the fear, some of the pain, some of the sadness, some of the overwhelm, some of all of that can be us really having a moment of being much more sensitive than we're used to being and starting to register maybe what's ambiently going on, whether it's stuff we've seen online and kind of, wars and tragedies and, cultural incidents happening, whether that is learning about history, whether that's just kind of being aware of the kind of general emotional tone, the tone of the vibe of your town and your neighborhood and kind of your local zone around you. I do think we can tap into all of that. And whether or not it's real, I think it's subjectively real inside of our perception and our processing, maybe unconsciously, of whatever information we're taking in about the world around us. So yes, I do think it's entirely possible to end up being confronted by stuff that isn't necessarily ours per se, individually, independently, and personally. There's also a huge conversation in psychedelics that I know is already being had, so I'm not going to touch upon it too much because it's not my area of expertise, about social movements and privilege, these kinds of things, and how that impacts a person's psychedelic experience. If a person comes from an underprivileged background, if a person comes from, some sort of adversity that's kind of built into their life experience, that obviously shows up too. And that gets into kind of systemic processing and processing kind of the darkness and the weirdness that exists in different social systems, whether these be kind of more moral codes of the past, or if we're talking, more literally like governmental systems, which can be quite dark in and of themselves. Let's keep it real here. So there's that. There is also generational trauma. And this is a really important topic to talk about. I'll probably be talking about more, I'm sure, in the future. But there's some science that seems to show that epigenetically we can pass on learnings, including traumatic experience learnings, through our genes to our offspring. And so it seems like it may be possible that trauma that doesn't get processed by us gets passed on, right? So conversely, obviously, if you take a psychedelic, you're having a really heavy, sad experience, it's possible that what you're processing didn't originate with you, but maybe from your parents or your grandparents, someone else further back in your family line. Or maybe someone's kind of emotional energy in the environment you grew up in, maybe a sibling's energy or an aunt or uncle's energy or a step parent's energy. All of that also has an impact on what you feel, and you may tap into that and really have to work through that. So intergenerational trauma is a huge topic. It's very real in my experience. I've seen some really profound things happen with clients who address intergenerational trauma. And yeah, and again, there's science to back this up. So it's not just merely a matter of pure kind of conjecture and kind of woo here. We're definitely in the territory of something that's kind of observable and quite frankly pretty well known. If you talk to therapists or read about therapy or look into it, it seems to really be a thing. The other major piece of the transpersonal. Oh, right. So here's the other side of the coin. So yes, I do think transpersonal issues, transpersonal pain, things that are not about you, but that you feel when you open yourself up and you kind of go deep within yourself. I do think that's very possible. I do think that's very real. I do think it can be kind of difficult to kind of parse out sometimes what's yours and what's not yours. Sometimes it's really clear. And you're like, wow, I'm processing the grief of humanity, or I'm processing the history of, my genetic line or what have you. Other times it can be really ambiguous. And I do think there's a little bit of a temptation for some of us to maybe not take ownership of pain that's ours and kind of, pass the buck, so to speak, to being something that's either transpersonal, not my pain, or generational, it's my parents, my grandparents, whatever pain, and try to use that as a strategy to avoid. So the other side of it here is that sometimes we will encounter sad, painful, frightening aspects that are in our own psyche at the unconscious level that may look like entities or intelligences or energy spots in the body, this kind of a thing. And maybe it is ours, but there can be kind of a tendency to want to, again, kind of dissociate from that, not connect to it, not process it, and kind of, kind of be like, oh yeah, that's just humanity's collective shit. It's not my problem, kind of a thing, and do some spiritual bypassing, essentially. So that's also possible. And so I think this can be a little bit of a tricky thing when it comes to intergenerational trauma and or systemic trauma, these kinds of things. My sense of it is that whether or not it originated with you, if it's showing up in you, you have the opportunity to heal it. You have the opportunity to transform it, to work with it, to shape shift it, and it's impacting you because you're feeling it, right? So whether or not it started with you or not, the opportunity exists with you to work with it and transform it and heal it. And I think that that's often a more useful way to kind of think about this stuff is like, okay, well, here it is in me. It's uncomfortable or sad or heavy or, needs tending to. Am I going to have the courage, the kindness, the compassion, the completeness, the thoroughness to just address it and deal with it. And I think that's important. I think that's really valuable. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about this topic. Not really. I think those are kind of my basic initial thoughts when it comes to kind of transpersonal pain, transpersonal sorrows. Yes, they exist. Yes, there is kind of a collective grief field that we can tap into and tune into, and it can be really sad and really heavy. I do think it's sometimes a really beautiful thing to spend a journey doing that, though, really, or at least part of a journey, really feeling and connecting to all that and allowing that to open your heart, allowing that to humanize you, to sensitize you, to put you back in touch with the realness of life and the gravity of life and the shit our ancestors have lived through to make this beautiful life experience we currently have possible. And also what still needs to put us in touch with what still needs healing in ourselves, in our family line, in our society around us, in our town, our culture, our local culture. I think all of that is important to be in touch with and important to honor and respect and acknowledge and feel. And so, yeah, I just want to make a video kind of affirming that if you're having those kinds of experiences, that you're not crazy, you're not cuckoo. This is a real thing. This does happen. It can be very heavy, and sometimes it might be yours, and sometimes it may have originated from outside of you. And either way, if you're feeling it, it's an opportunity to connect, to work with it, to process it, to resonate with what needs resonating, to transform what needs transforming, and to really do the work of bringing loving attention to these corners of the human experience, whether they belong to you or someone else, that really deserve a bit of loving attention. I think I want to wrap it there. So enough said on that. If you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, I would love to get your perspective. Please leave a comment below. And if you like this kind of content, you like psychedelic related content in terms of personal growth, personal development, personal healing, yada, yada, please consider subscribing if you haven't yet. My name is Dave. Once again, big love to you all. And I'm wishing you a beautiful life experience, whether it's day or night, wherever you are. And we'll talk soon. All right. Take care.